One time I was like very frustrated by the limitations of my body. And I think that poetry was a way for me to reach outside of that. Self-portrait with my eidolon. All I know is how to shiver. I was born in rain and continue to live there. I want to believe when you say it's warm and I can't feel it. Belief is a word that rests cold and heavy on my tongue. If someday it evaporates, I will relinquish time as just another figure to measure my existence along with my height, weight, waist, and dick size. Men are very particular about these things. When the seasons change, so do I, signaling you with the cuttlefish's war paint, the undulation of color on my skin, hypnotizing you into a long sleep you might never wake up from. I'm not so cruel. Some days I want to know your cloudless world, the soft sighs in every stanza of your poems. Some days I want to wrestle an angel to the ground just so he can know its flavor. I see in you a childhood full of dust devils, a country with my name. I see in you a place to mouth dumb questions to a God that doesn't have words enough to answer. So in this poem, I do talk about, like, I'm referencing Jacob wrestling the angel, but I'm also talking about the kinds of particular ways we break our bodies down when we're advertising ourselves on like dating or hookup websites or, you know, apps. And so like the stuff about dick size, like you can find that on Grindr. And I'm very kind of, I guess, stimulated by taking these lofty kind of concepts. I'm very rooted in like the Judeo-Christian tradition, but also Greek mythology. And both, I think, are kind of venerated in this way, almost seen as pristine, especially like the Judeo-Christian tradition. Those stories, those myths, if I can call them that, are very, have a kind of hallowed place in our culture and society, at least in some, you know, communities. And the idea of contrasting that with the baseness of being human, the dirt, as you say, I think it's an interesting place to live. And that's, I think, where a lot of the poems live, in that place, because I think as a person, that is how I have felt, being you know, maybe a self-described intellectual person who is very connected to his materiality, like his body. And I've wanted to explore that in the writing. And I think you do see that as a thread throughout the poems. Arranged in a pile, stinking like wildflowers, used gym socks protruding from their mouths like stamen. Why is the stink of bacteria so alluring to me? The accumulation of single cells in a dark, damp soul, the minutia of Adidas, Chucks, and Nikes lying on the floor with mute tongues. This is my secret that stops being a secret when I write it. I have an interest in feet and socks and shoes. It is a, you know, a sexual interest, a kink interest. And I think in a lot of ways, kink is one of the areas that's still taboo in a way in writing. I mean, queerness was that for a long time. You had to be so coded, you know, in the time of like Tom Gunn even. But, you know, these days we can talk about, you know, like anal and whatever, right? And so to me, talking about kink interests, paraphernalias, as they're called in the DSM. These things, I think, are an area where it's still kind of risque and taboo, and it feels a little bit wrong to divulge them. And so I wanted to write a poem exploring, you know, I guess my fetish in a sort of, I guess, expansive way. It's kind of heightened and absurd in a way. Um, you know, some of that is like playing with Greek myth, like the anecdote to the pig is kind of a reference to Circe, you know, in the Odyssey, and her transforming the sailors into pigs. Birds, I think, have always been a very popular animal with poets. So have deer. A good friend of mine, Jacques Rancourt, always talks about deer in his poems, and so I wanted to write poems with deer concepts. You know, the faun is kind of both about a deer but also about like this more of a satyr creature, so it kind of mixes that. And also I was thinking of Pan's Labyrinth as well when I wrote that poem. But yeah, I think it kind of gets to the carnality of you know, of like the sexual impulse to some degree, and that kind of dirty, profane kind of baseness that I'm interested in. I think a lot of those animals kind of hit on that idea.
Right.
Yeah, it's really tough, especially when you've dealt with like abuse or
Mm-hmm.
like addiction issues,
Yep.
in your family. It's really tough because you don't want to like hurt them with the truth, but at the same time, you need to speak your truth. And so, veils, metaphors, obviously, this helps. It also helps if your family aren't really readers, so you don't have to worry about them directly confronting it unless you present it to them
Yeah.
too much. Self portrait during a tornado sighting. Through the window, I see a murmuration of starlings bat against the weather vane like bullets of rain and feel my buzzing thigh. Text and social media tear across the Great Plains and Rocky Mountain states, heralding news of earthquakes in California. My mother's messages are worry, worry. Paraphrased, my replies read, guilty, guilty. I type furiously, I don't see the twister, though I do, transfixed as the swirl pummels trees in the distance, licking its fists with every advance. The television offers no advice. Red, green, and yellow flash over a map of Ohio as if the state were a cuttlefish mesmerizing its prey with a light show. I am God scared now, seeing the layers of grit and shearing magic too closely. God is taking his drill to the earth. My yarmulke will not protect me, ducking and covered on a second floor apartment building, wearing a loose helmet of fingers over that. I'm down to a lone match flickering in the tar dark, listening to the trauma in the tornado siren's automatic bleeding, not for the cyclone, but for the birdless quiet that follows. I remember in the fall, the very first time I heard those tornado sirens, and it was like a thunderstorm, and it was very alarming and very scary for me, Californian in the Midwest, whereas the Midwesterners who I was living with were like unbothered because, they can tell the subtle differences between, a serious tornado thing and like, oh, this thing is miles away. It's going to pass by us. We're fine. I really became aware of like the geographical, like kind of the specificities of like the different parts of our country, right? Because if you grow up in one place, you really do think that that is how everything is. if an idea there's like an energy and an arc to it, right? When I sit down, I kind of go, and if at any point when I'm going I just kind of lose it, I just save a copy of it and put it in my unfinished drafts folder, and then I start over again. And then sometimes I'll also sit down and I'll be like, let's go through these unfinished drafts and see if anything sparks, piques my interest, and then I'll grab a line from that and start with it. Or sometimes when I have an idea and I'm like, I like this, but it needs a different end or it needs something else, sometimes I'll go in the drafts folder again and pull that out, and I'll write that and I'll throw that at the end and see if that works. Something else I do a lot when I revise is I actually fully rewrite poems. So what I do is I have like one document of the poem on the left that I wrote, and then I open up a new document and I just start almost like transcribing it, but I let things change when they want to or as they like.
Right.
So if like, so if I like write one line, I'll write the same line, the second line, I'll change a word or two just in the process of rewriting it. It's hard to explain. It feels almost automatic in a way. Sometimes when I don't feel like the lines are working, I'll just change the poem into a prose block and then I'll relineate it a couple times and see how that changes the way it feels. I want to write more about popular culture, and I do a little bit, but I love Pokemon, I love superheroes. Yes, I love all that stuff. And I want to kind of get more into that. My next idea for a book is kind of TV film focused. And so I haven't really started that project too much in earnest yet, because I've been kind of wanting this thing to kind of fully gestate and, exit the womb, the birthing canal, before I really get into the next thing. Some people can like juggle multiple things at a time, but I don't have like the work ethic or energy level for that, frankly. So I need to get this going and then like I'll think about the other thing. Maybe that's my excuse for just avoiding and being a procrastinator.